Hello, my name is Seamus, and welcome to the On Tour New Retreats YouTube channel. This video you're about to watch is the second video in a series that I made from a conversation that I had with Peter Taylor. He's an astrophysicist in UCD, and I got the pleasure of sitting down with him over Zoom and having a conversation. I got to ask him questions, and he was good enough to give me really good answers. This is the second video in the series, so if you haven't seen the first one, you might want to check that out. You don't have to, it's not required viewing. So without further ado, here's the second video. So, kind of leading into this, you mentioned there about asking those kind of unknowable questions or trying to find out something that is unknowable. Kind of leads me into like why we kind of have you here today, because you're also a Christian, and Christians, we get a lot of flack for maybe not pursuing those questions because we can't answer them, or we just say, oh, it was God, how did this happen? It was God. How did this happen? It was God. Which can kind of seem counter scientific, because you're not asking the questions, and science is about asking the questions. So you're also a Christian. So can you first of all tell us why are you a Christian?
Why am I Christian? Yeah, that's a question we don't ask ourselves enough, actually. So yeah, I think the answer is probably much less to do with my scientific mind than anything else. It's probably more of a personal testimony. So I would say I have no real recollection of not having a consciousness of God. Like, I don't think at any point in my life I could ever say that I was atheist. I always had a consciousness of God. Now that's quite separate to saying you're a Christian, of course. But I feel like I've always kind of had an awareness of God, that there was something out there. But I would say the biggest and the most important thing in my life that contributed to me following God, following Jesus, taking Christianity serious, was how God changed our family as a whole. So when I was very young, and my parents, they had 4 young kids in their early 20s. We lived in a tiny little council estate in Bray, and it was quite tumultuous. Like, things were fairly hectic. So my parents partied a lot. They argued a lot. They got in trouble a lot. It wasn't a particularly stable home. And I think there was a bit of a turning point. One Christmas, there was a house just across the road from us in the same estate, actually where my best friend lived, and their house went up in flames on Christmas Day, I think it was, maybe Christmas Eve, and only the father and the eldest son survived. So the mother and all of the other kids, they didn't make it, including my best friend Keith. At that time, I was about 6 or 7, but he also passed away in that fire. But this actually affected my mum really deeply. Like, it really had a great impact on her. And I think what it was that she just couldn't get away from the fact of just how short life was, just how in a blink that this family were here and now they're not. And for her, it was kind of this, I guess, really brought to the fore of your mind. And it's a question that's really important for everybody, is like, what if anything is after death? Right? It's a really important question, right? We almost never think about it, but like, it's so essentially important to wrestle with that question at some point. And so that question really weighed heavily on her, and she started going along to this local Christian church that she had attended some years earlier, but had stopped attending, and started following God seriously. And in a matter of months, like, her whole life was absolutely transformed. In a matter of months, our family life transformed. So like stability, almost in a matter of months. Like, she stopped drinking, she stopped smoking. There was no more, or at least a lot less, arguing in the household. Got to be honest about it, as if there exists a household with no arguing. Yeah. But we had stability, and all of a sudden she was trying to instill discipline and worth and value and love in us. So it just completely changed our whole family dynamic, really, really quickly. And so that was the kind of home then I grew up in, was this kind of going to church, this consciousness of God, this awareness that God had transformed our family life. And then, of course, you have to make that decision for yourself as well, right? You
Yeah.
can't live vicariously through your mum's experience. So when I was about 19 or 20, I kind of had that same realization that I guess I'd kind of been pursuing everything else seriously, like everything to kind of satisfy that kind of longing inside me. And I think every person, no matter who you are, you recognize that there's kind of an emptiness in your heart. There's kind of a longing, like an itch you can't scratch or something like that inside you. And you try to fill it every which way, right? I was trying to pursue success. I was trying to pursue popularity. I was trying to pursue everything to fill that kind of that weird nag inside me that I couldn't quite articulate. And it just nothing really filled it, to be honest. And then I said, okay, let me try follow this Jesus person seriously. Let me take this Christianity thing seriously. And just transformed me, to be honest. Like it really did transform my life. I think the most commonly testified feeling that Christians will speak of is just a feeling of peace when they make that decision. It's just like, oh yeah, like my life is actually in God's hands. Like he's ordering my steps. All that striving, all of that effort, all of that burden kind of feels like it lifts off your shoulders. And not even in that kind of not even in that sense of escapism or that sense of maybe that sense of an opium that Karl Marx spoke of. Not even in that sense, because like any Christian will tell you, there's a great burden as well that comes with Christianity. Like there's a standard of living that's much higher than the norm. So it's not an opium in that sense, but somehow you walk through all of the difficulties with a peace, with an emotional resilience. And I think that was it for me, just making that decision and just noticing the impact, noticing the effect on my life. So it's very much more a personal story for me than it is an intellectual thing. Although you encounter lots of intellectual doubts along the way that I think my scientific background, my intellectual background has helped me with.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, peace. Like, I think that's we do a lot of testimonies in school, so we tell the students kind of part of our own personal story, and I've worked with so many different people that have heard so many different stories, including my own, and that's the one thing that's like in it, like we say we have this peace, but it doesn't mean that everything is rosy and we get all the good car parking spaces and the toast never burns and stuff like that. It's like it's just different, it's just okay. I found that I wasn't so petty with my siblings anymore, like everything wasn't a battle, and it was like, I can you have this understanding, and it's like, okay, like just have this peace. It's the only way to describe it really is the peace.
Yeah, and I think a part of that piece comes from understanding more fully and more thoroughly and more truly who you actually are. Like great peace in that.
Yeah.
So like you can still do things with great excellence that might make you successful, but you kind of know your value isn't in your success. So even though the outcome might be the same, the inward reality is very different. And I think that's where the peace really comes from. It comes from that kind of, you're no longer striving to, or at least you're striving less. To try to justify your value or your worth. And I genuinely do think there's great peace in that. And it's one of the things that mankind struggles with most, no matter what walk of life you're from. There is this sense of trying to justify your value to the world, or justify your work, or even to yourself. And I think Christianity really reorders that internal reality inside of you in a way that makes your internal reality very different.
So guys, that was the second video. I hope you enjoyed it, and the third video will be on its way shortly.